When I first met Alex at a crowded finance conference, it wasn't exactly love at first sight. We bumped into each other, coffee in hand, both of us running late for the same session. "Watch it," I snapped, as a bit of my coffee splashed over the rim. "Sorry about that," Alex shot back, not missing a beat. "Guess we're both trying to cram knowledge in at the last minute, huh?" Despite the rocky start, we found ourselves laughing about it later. Turns out, we had a lot in common, especially our drive for success and independence. After dating for a year, filled with heated debates and passionate makeups, we decided to take the plunge and get married. But not in the traditional sense. We both loved our jobs. I was climbing the ladder in financial accounting, and he was making waves in sales. So, we laid it all out, blunt and straightforward. "Screw traditional," Alex said one evening, his eyes serious for once. "Let's not be one of those couples who end up fighting over money." I nodded. "Yeah, let's do a prenup. Keep what's yours, I'll keep what's mine. If things go south, we walk away clean." The decision to sign a prenuptial agreement was less about distrust and more about mutual respect for our hard-earned careers. We didn't want the potential mess of untangling assets if things didn't work out. Plus, it felt good knowing we both entered the marriage as equals. Splitting the bills was a no-brainer. 50-50, Alex agreed. And no whining about who spends more on groceries. I laughed at that. "Deal, but you're not getting out of housework." "I'm not your maid." "Fair enough," he conceded. "But I don't do windows." That's how we started our married life, on a foundation of honesty, equality, and a touch of humor. We opened a joint account, strictly for shared expenses, rent, utilities, and those occasional fancy dinners to celebrate our wins. It was a system that worked perfectly for us, allowing us to maintain our financial independence while building a life together. Our biggest achievement came when we finally saved enough to buy an apartment right in the city center. It was a dream come true. The day we got the keys, we stood in the empty living room, surrounded by boxes and painting supplies, both of us grinning like idiots. "Look at this place," I said, spreading my arms wide. "Our very own piece of the concrete jungle." Alex wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "It's perfect. Just needs a bit of paint and maybe some of those fancy curtains you like." I leaned back into him, feeling the warmth of his body. "We did it, babe. 50-50, all the way." "Yeah," he whispered, kissing the side of my head. "Our perfect little empire." That apartment wasn't just a home, it was a symbol of our partnership, our commitment to walking side by side as equals. We were thrilled, basking in the glow of our joint achievement, blissfully unaware of the challenges that lay ahead. But in that moment, everything felt possible. We had each other, and that was all that mattered. Life with Alex started off on cloud nine. We were the perfect team, or so I thought. We were both climbing our career ladders, supporting each other, or at least that was the plan. Things started changing when Alex's mom, Mrs. Thompson, began dropping by more often. I never really clicked with her. She had this old-school vibe about women's roles, and me working full-time didn't sit well with her. One evening, as I was slogging through spreadsheets, Alex and his mom were in the living room, whispering. I could hear bits and pieces, her voice sharper than a knife's edge. I finally took a break and walked in, just in time to hear Mrs. Thompson say, "Emma's always buried in her work. Doesn't she know a wife should care for her husband?" Alex, bless him, tried to play peacemaker. "Mom, things are different now. Emma's job is important to her, and it helps us out a lot." But Mrs. Thompson wouldn't have it. "Back in my day, we knew our priorities. Your wife should be at home, making sure you're looked after, not glued to a computer screen." I couldn't bite my tongue any longer. "Mrs. Thompson, I respect your views, but times have changed. I'm not just going to sit at home." Alex and I agreed on this lifestyle before we got married. Alex chimed in, trying to smooth things over. "Yeah, Mom, we're doing things differently. We're partners in everything. Mrs. Thompson scoffed. Partners? A woman's place is in the home, not competing with men. Look at your sister, a proper woman, caring for her family. That hit a nerve. Being a proper woman doesn't mean giving up on my career or ambitions. I shot back, my patience wearing thin. The conversation ended with Mrs. Thompson huffing. Well, I just hope you know what you're doing. A family needs more than money. After she left, Alex and I had a heart-to-heart. Babe, you know I'm on your side, right? He said, taking my hands in his. My mom's from a different time. We'll do things our way. I nodded, wanting to believe him. I know, Alex. But it's not just about your mom. It's about us sticking to our guns, making sure we're on the same page. He hugged me. Always, Em. We're in this together. But that conversation with Mrs. Thompson was just the start. Her visits became more frequent, her comments more pointed. And each time, Alex's assurances seemed to lose a bit of their strength. I started to feel like I was on my own, defending our choices, our lifestyle. It wasn't long before this tension spilled over into other parts of our life. The apartment that had been our happy place, our sanctuary in the city center, started to feel less like home. We were thrilled when we bought it, our own little slice of the city. It was supposed to be our fortress against the world, but instead, it began to feel like a battleground for old versus new, tradition versus ambition. Our happy acquisition was turning into a reminder of the growing divide between us, a divide that seemed to widen with every visit from Mrs. Thompson and every silent dinner that followed. Our home, once filled with laughter and plans for the future, now echoed with the unspoken tensions of a partnership strained by external pressures and unmet expectations. The days turned into a pattern I couldn't ignore. I kept the pace at work, juggling numbers and deadlines like a pro, all for the sake of our future. Alex, on the other hand, started showing up home way earlier than usual. At first, I thought it was a temporary thing, but then the pattern stuck. The joint account, once buzzing with regular deposits from both of us, began to feel the absence of his contributions. And then, they stopped altogether. One evening, I decided it was time to address the elephant in the room. Alex, we need to talk about the joint account. What's going on? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. He sighed, a bit too heavily. Babe, sales have been in the dumps. I'm not making as much as before. It's a tough time at work. I wasn't panicking, we had savings, and my job was stable. Okay, I get that. Things are rough everywhere. But since you're home early now, maybe you could help out more around here? I suggested, hoping he'd see the logic. Alex, sprawled on the sofa, phone in hand, didn't even bother looking up. Help out? Like how? I was flabbergasted. You know, household stuff. Cooking, cleaning. We're a team, right? He finally looked at me, his expression a mix of disbelief and annoyance. Emma, come on. You know that stuff's your department. I've got enough on my plate. My jaw dropped. My department? What century are you living in, Alex? I'm working just as hard, if not harder. I thought we agreed to share responsibilities. He shrugged, his attention already drifting back to his phone. That's different. You're better at it, anyway. That hit me like a slap. I was counting on an equal partnership, not this outdated script he was suddenly following. I can't believe what I'm hearing. Is this really how you see our marriage? Alex let out a frustrated sigh. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? It's just how things are. Just how things are? I repeated, my voice rising. No, Alex. That's not how we agreed to things. I'm out there busting my ass every day, same as you, or at least I thought so. And then I come home to a second shift, because you've decided you're too good for woman's work? He didn't respond, just kept his eyes on his phone, and that silence said everything. I was seething, hurt, and suddenly very alone in what I thought was a partnership. This wasn't the deal. This wasn't the man I thought I married. We were supposed to be equals, but here I was, feeling like I'd somehow been demoted in my own home. The morning sun barely crept through the curtains when I realized the alarm hadn't gone off. In a frenzy, I scrambled out of bed, my heart racing against the clock. Alex, ever so calm, was sprawled on the couch, his eyes glued to his phone, seemingly oblivious to the chaos. "Alex," I pleaded, half-dressed and struggling to find my other shoe. "I'm running late, and it's going to be a marathon day at work. Can you please handle dinner tonight?" My voice was a mix of hope and desperation, clinging to the slim chance he'd step up. He spared me a brief glance, his attention tethered to the screen. Yeah, he mumbled, a noncommittal grunt that did little to assure me. "Got it, dinner. Sure." I paused, the knot in my stomach tightening. "You mean it, right?" Because last time, the memory of coming home to an empty table flashed in my mind, a silent testament to forgotten promises. Alex's annoyance was palpable as he cut me off. I said yes, didn't I? "Go on, don't worry about it." His dismissive wave was the final nudge out the door, leaving me to rush into the day with a heavy heart. The hours at work were a blur, each task piling atop the next, leaving no room for breath or thought. By the time evening wrapped its fingers around the city, I was spent, my body and mind crying for respite. The thought of coming home to a warm meal offered a glimmer of comfort in the exhausting routine my life had become. But the apartment greeted me with silence, an eerie echo of my solitude. The kitchen, untouched, bore no signs of a meal prepared, the table as barren as it had been that morning. Confusion gave way to a sinking realization as I noted Alex's absence. With a trembling hand, I dialed his number, each ring a beat in the mounting dread. His voice, slurred and distant, pierced the quiet. "Yeah? Where are you?" "I thought you were going to handle dinner," I managed, my voice a mix of frustration and disappointment. His laugh, a sound I once adored, now felt like a sharp jab. "Nah, decided to crash at my sister's. You know, where a real dinner happens. Not like our place, eh?" The word stung, a cruel reminder of the chasm between us. "So, my working late to support us makes our home less of a home? Is that it, Alex?" My voice cracked, the hurt spilling over. "Look, Emma, it's not just about dinner. It's about feeling appreciated, you know? Like someone actually cares I'm there." His words, thick with accusations and alcohol, laid bare the fissures in our marriage. The line went dead, but the silence that followed was anything but peaceful. I stood in the middle of our kitchen, a room that once felt like the heart of our home, now just a hollow space. The tears came then, unbidden and relentless, mourning not just a missed meal, but the love and partnership I thought we had. The tension between Alex and me had been simmering just below the surface, but the events of the past few weeks had turned up the heat, threatening to boil over at any moment. The day it all came to a head was like any other, with the weight of unresolved grievances hanging heavy in the air. I had just walked in from another grueling day at work, my mind a whirlwind of numbers and deadlines, when I noticed the mail scattered on the kitchen counter. Among the usual bills and flyers, a statement from our joint account caught my eye. The balance was far lower than it should have been. Heart pounding, I rifled through the transactions, my confusion turning to disbelief and then to anger as one entry stood out, a large withdrawal made by Alex. "Alex!" I called out, my voice sharper than I intended. He emerged from the living room, phone in hand, a look of feigned innocence plastered on his face. "What's up?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light. I slammed the statement on the counter, pointing at the damning entry. "What is this? Why did you take out so much money without talking to me first?" He shrugged, a casual dismissal that fueled my frustration. "Oh, that. Just had to cover some expenses, you know how it is." "Expenses?" I echoed, incredulous. "For what? And why didn't you discuss it with me?" He sighed, the facade of nonchalance slipping. "Look, Emma, I needed a new car. The old one's been acting up, and I got a good deal on this one. A new car? With our savings? I was struggling to keep my voice steady, the betrayal stinging more than the financial loss. We're supposed to be saving for our future, not squandering it on impulsive buys. Alex's patience was wearing thin. Impulsive? I think I deserve a little something for myself, don't you? It's not like I'm asking for much. Not asking for much? I could hardly believe what I was hearing. You're making decisions with our money, our future, without even a thought for me. Where's the partnership in that? The room charged with tension, our frustrations boiling over into a heated argument that left us both spent and angry. The distance between us felt insurmountable, the divide widened by every harsh word and accusation. As we stood there, the air thick with unsaid things, the phone rang, slicing through the silence like a knife. I answered, my voice raw from shouting. It was Mrs. Thompson, her tone sharp and accusing from the get-go. Emma, what's this I hear about you denying Alex a simple pleasure? A man works hard, he deserves to enjoy the fruits of his labor. I was stunned into silence for a moment, disbelief giving way to anger. Mrs. Thompson, with all due respect, this is between me and Alex. And for the record, he didn't work hard for this. It was our savings, for our future. Her scoff was audible, dripping with disdain. You young people and your future. A good wife supports her husband's decisions, not questions them. In that moment, I knew something had to change. But whether we could bridge the gap between us, or if it was too late for repairs, only time would tell. What was clear, however, was that the path ahead would be anything but easy. Life has a way of throwing surprises at you when you least expect them. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, I received a letter that knocked the wind out of me. My great-uncle, a man of few words and solitary habits, had passed away. I hadn't seen him in years, and our interactions were nothing more than occasional, awkward conversations during the rare family gatherings. Yet, here I was, holding a letter from a lawyer, telling me he had left me everything he owned. His entire estate, his savings, everything was now mine. It was surreal, to say the least. I remember staring at that letter, the words blurring as a mix of emotions washed over me. Sadness, confusion, and a creeping sense of responsibility I wasn't sure I was ready for. And then there was Alex. His reaction to the news was like he'd hit the jackpot. Babe, do you realize what this means? We're set, he exclaimed, his eyes lighting up with a mixture of excitement and, dare I say, greed that I hadn't seen in him before. A week has passed, and I returned home tired after another crazy day at work. What I saw shocked me. There, in the midst of what should have been an ordinary evening, was my husband, Alex, beaming like he'd won the lottery, surrounded by his family, all of them basking in the glow of my great-uncle's unexpected generosity. Look who's finally home! Alex exclaimed, thrusting a glass of champagne into my hands, his excitement palpable. We're celebrating your big windfall, babe. The sight of the lavish spread from the city's priciest restaurant laid out on our table, and the merriment in their eyes, felt jarringly out of place. My mind raced, trying to piece together the surreal scene before me. Quit my job today, Alex announced proudly, as if he'd just made the most normal decision in the world. Why work when we've got this fortune, right? His grin widened, oblivious to the shock that must have been written all over my face. His parents, his sister, her husband, their kids, all were there, acting as if they'd just won the jackpot. And then, as if on cue, Alex added, "Oh, and before you join us, the dishes won't wash themselves, you know?" Laughter erupted from the crowd, a chorus of approval at his joke. But to me, it sounded like nails on a chalkboard. Fury coursed through me, hot and unstoppable. Here I was, after a day of grueling work, expected to play the maid at my own celebration? It was madness. I was on the brink of unleashing a torrent of anger, ready to set things straight, when Mrs. Thompson, ever the matriarch, called for a serious conversation. Dragging myself to the armchair, every ounce of my being screamed in protest. What could she possibly say that would make any of this better? My mind was a whirlwind of indignation and disbelief. Were they really so oblivious to the audacity of their actions? Did they see me as nothing more than a benefactor for their whims? As the absurd proposal hung in the air, courtesy of my mother-in-law, suggesting we use my inheritance to build a colossal house for what felt like the entire clan, I could only stare in disbelief. The idea that not only would we all live together, but that this would somehow excuse the entire family from ever working again, was ludicrous. Alex, beaming as if he'd just unveiled the master plan of the century, chimed in. Think about it, babe. We'd never have to worry about anything ever again. The room was filled with nods and murmurs of agreement, as if they'd all been let in on the plan before this moment. As I looked around at these people, my supposed family, I felt more like an outsider than ever. Breaking the celebratory bubble with a voice steadier than I felt, I said, I'm filing for divorce. The room fell silent, the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Alex's smile faltered, his parents' jaws dropped, and his sister's glass of champagne paused midway to her lips. My mother-in-law, always quick on her feet, laughed dismissively. Oh, darling, even if you do, the law's on our side. Alex gets half of everything you've got. Her smug assurance was the last straw. Actually, I countered, a bitter laugh escaping me. Our prenup says otherwise. Alex gets nothing of mine if we divorce. The shock that rippled through the room was palpable, their wide eyes meeting my firm gaze. And another thing, I continued, my voice gaining strength. I'll be taking all the furniture, every appliance, everything I paid for. And Alex, you'll be hearing from my lawyer about the unpaid bills and expenses you've conveniently ignored. The fantasy bubble they'd been living in burst right then and there. One by one, I watched as their faces fell, the realization that their free ride was over dawning on them. Without another word, I ushered them towards the door, their protests and pleas falling on deaf ears. As the door closed behind the last of them, the silence that enveloped the apartment was suffocating. Yet, beneath it all, a sense of relief began to wash over me. I was free from the expectations, the manipulations, and the sheer audacity of a family that saw me not as a person, but as a means to an end. After the dust settled on the courtroom battles and the ink dried on the divorce papers, I started anew in the house my great-uncle left me. It was a fresh start, a chance to rebuild my life on my terms, free from the constraints of a marriage that had become suffocating. Alex, now living with his parents, found himself grappling with the realities of a day-to-day life that required him to work, really work, for the first time in a long while. Every so often, he'd call me, his voice tinged with a desperation I hadn't heard before. Come on, can't we just wipe the slate clean and start over? He'd plead, the echoes of his once confident demeanor replaced by uncertainty. His mother, too, took to calling me, her tone uncharacteristically sweet, a stark contrast to the sharpness I'd grown accustomed to. Dear, wouldn't you reconsider? For the family's sake? She'd coo, as if the words could erase the past and mend what had been broken. Each time, I couldn't help but laugh, a sound of freedom and relief. No, thank you. I'd reply, my voice steady and sure. I'm quite happy with where I am now. And happy I was. With the chains of a loveless marriage behind me, I found joy in the simple things. I traveled, exploring corners of the world I'd only dreamed of seeing. I threw myself into charity work, finding fulfillment in helping those in need, both people and pets alike. The gratitude in their eyes, the genuine smiles, and wagging tails brought a sense of purpose back into my life, a reminder that there was so much good I could do, so much love I could give, without expecting anything in return. The liberation from my old life, from the expectations and demands of others, allowed me to rediscover myself. I was no longer defined by my relationship with Alex or his family. I was my own person, complete and content in my independence. The house my great-uncle left me became more than just a place to live, it was a sanctuary, a space where I could grow, heal, and thrive. It was here, among the memories of a man who had quietly supported me from afar, that I built a life filled with passion, purpose, and peace. As I look back on the journey that brought me here, From the turmoil and strife to the calm and contentment, I'm reminded of the resilience of the human spirit. Life, with all its twists and turns, had led me to this moment of liberation, a testament to the strength within me and the promise of a future filled with endless possibilities.
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. president of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.